Hey there, welcome back to Color and Craft Haven, a little corner of calm where we can slow down, breathe, and add a little color to the day. Today we're talking about something that sounds simple on the surface, but actually holds a lot of depth once you sit with it for a while. The difference between hobby crafting and artistic practice. And more importantly, how your mindset shifts when you move from one into the other, or when you choose not to. Because here's the thing, neither one is better than the other. This isn't about upgrading yourself or turning your peaceful hobby into something stressful. It's about understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what kind of relationship you want to have with your creativity. So let's start with hobby crafting. Hobby crafting is where most of us begin, and honestly, it's where a lot of us stay, quite happily. It's relaxed, it's flexible, it's something you pick up when you have the time, when you feel like it, when the mood strikes. There's no pressure to improve, no expectation to produce something meaningful or technically impressive. You color because it feels good. You paint because you like the way the brush moves. You glue, fold, sculpt, or stitch because it gives your hands something satisfying to do. And that's not small. That's not less than. That's actually incredibly valuable. Hobby crafting is often where we find our calm. That's where we decompress after a long day. It's where we reconnect with ourselves when life gets noisy. It's playful, low stakes, and forgiving. You can make something messy. You can abandon a project halfway through. You can switch styles every week and never look back. There's a kind of freedom in that, and for a lot of people, that freedom is exactly what they need. But then, sometimes something shifts. Not for everyone, and not all at once. But maybe you start noticing your color choices more. Maybe you begin to care about shading, blending, or composition. Maybe you look at your work and think, I wonder if I could do this better. That's usually the moment where hobby crafting starts brushing up against artistic practice. Artistic practice isn't defined by talent or skill level. That's a really important distinction. It's defined by intention. When you move into artistic practice, you're no longer just creating for the sake of doing. You're creating with awareness, with curiosity, with a desire to understand what you're doing and how to grow. You start asking questions. Why does this color combination work? Why does this one feel off? How do I create depth here? How do I make this look more luminous, more textured, more balanced? And instead of shrugging and moving on, you sit with those questions. That's the shift. It's not about becoming serious or turning your craft into work. It's about becoming engaged in a different way. You begin to notice patterns. You start to recognize your own habits, the colors you always reach for, the techniques you avoid, the shortcuts you take without realizing it. And once you notice them, you have a choice. You can keep doing what's comfortable, or you can gently challenge yourself. Artistic practice is where that gentle challenge lives. It's where you try blending even though it feels awkward. It's where you attempt a new medium and accept that it might not look great the first time. It's where you slow down and pay attention to details you might have skipped before. And here's where a lot of people get stuck, because that space can feel uncomfortable. Hobby crafting is cozy because it doesn't ask anything of you. Artistic practice, on the other hand, asks for your attention, your patience, your willingness to be a beginner again, even if you've been crafting for years. It asks you to tolerate imperfection in a different way, not by ignoring it, but by working through it. That can feel vulnerable, because suddenly it's not just about filling a page or finishing a project. It's about learning. And learning always comes with a phase where things don't look the way you want them to. But here's the beautiful part. When you lean into artistic practice, your relationship with your creativity deepens. You start to feel more connected to what you're making. You begin to see progress, not just in the final results, but in how you think, how you observe, how you approach each piece. You might notice that you're slowing down more naturally, that you're more present while you're working, that you're less focused on rushing to the finished product and more interested in the process itself. That's where a lot of the magic happens. And for those of you who are here for relaxation, for stress relief, or for that cozy, mindful experience, this might sound like it's going to take that away. But it doesn't have to. Artistic practice doesn't mean pressure. It doesn't mean deadlines or perfectionism or turning your hobby into a job. It just means being a little more intentional about what you want to be. You can absolutely move between both spaces. And some days you might sit down and just color. No plan, no goal, no expectations. Just soft music, warm lighting, and the quiet rhythm of your hands moving across the page. Other days, you might decide to focus on a specific skill. Blending skin tones, experimenting with shadows, trying a new color palette inspired by a fantasy landscape. Both are valid. Both are valuable. The key is recognizing which space you're in and giving yourself permission to be there fully. One of the biggest mindset shifts here is letting go of the idea that you should be improving. Improvement is not a requirement for creativity. You are allowed to stay exactly where you are and to enjoy it. But if you want to grow, if that curiosity is already there, then artistic practice gives you a path forward that feels intentional rather than overwhelming. Another important shift is how you define success. In hobby crafting, success is often tied to enjoyment. Did you have a good time? Did it help you relax? Did you like the experience? In artistic practice, success becomes a little more layered. It might look like understanding something new. It might look like noticing improvement in a small area. It might look like finishing something even when it felt challenging. It's less about the final piece being perfect and more about what you gained from creating it. And that shift can be incredibly empowering because it means that even the pieces you don't love still matter. They're not failures. They're part of your practice. They're evidence that you showed up, paid attention, and tried something. That's growth. Now let's talk about something that often sneaks in during this transition. Comparison. When you start treating your craft as an artistic practice, it's very easy to start looking outward, to compare your work to others, to measure your progress against people who might be years ahead of you. And that can quickly drain the joy out of what you're doing. So here's a gentle reminder. Your practice is yours. Your pace is yours. The way you approach your creativity, whether it's soft and slow, structured and focused, or somewhere in between, is entirely up to you. There is no universal timeline for becoming better. There is no checklist you have to complete. There's just you and the quiet process of learning, noticing, and creating. And honestly, that's enough. Another mindset shift that can be really helpful is reframing mistakes. In hobby crafting, mistakes are often something you ignore or just work around. You might cover them up, adapt, or simply move on and don't care about it. In artistic practice, mistakes become information. They show you where something didn't work. They give you clues about what to try differently next time. They become part of your learning process rather than something to avoid at all costs. And when you start seeing mistakes that way, they lose a lot of their sting. They become less intimidating. You might even find yourself experimenting more because you're not afraid of getting it wrong. That's a powerful place to be. Now here's something I think is really important to say, especially for this community. You do not have to choose between being a hobby crafter and having an artistic practice. You can be both. You can have days where you're deeply focused, practicing a technique, paying attention to every detail, and days where you're just enjoying the feeling of coloring or crafting without thinking about it at all. Creativity doesn't have to be one thing. In fact, it's often richer when it isn't. For a lot of people, especially those who come to coloring and crafting for relaxation or mental health, staying in that hobby space is exactly what they need, and that's valid. But for others, There's a quiet pull toward growth, a curiosity that keeps coming back, a sense that there's more to explore. If that's you, then stepping into artistic practice doesn't mean losing the coziness. It just means expanding your relationship with your creativity. It means giving yourself permission to learn, to experiment, and to grow at your own pace, in your own way. And maybe, most importantly, it means letting go of rigid labels. You don't have to call yourself an artist. You don't have to reach a certain level before you qualify. If you're creating with intention, with curiosity, with a desire to understand what you're doing, you're already practicing art. That's all it is. So as you go into your next coloring session, your next craft project, your next quiet moment with your materials, take a second to check in with yourself. Ask yourself what you need today. Do you need comfort, play, something easy and familiar? Or do you feel a little spark of curiosity, something that wants to be explored, even if it's a bit uncomfortable? There's no wrong answer, just different paths, and both of them lead to something meaningful. That's it for today's colorful time. Tell me in the comments, do you see yourself more as a hobby crafter, someone building an artistic practice, or a mix of both? Take care, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.